right, we're live. Hi.
Hi.
This is week 2 of the Bible reading plan. We're glad you're jumping in with us, and I think we're just gonna jump into it. This is super casual here. We thank you for those of you that submitted questions. Again, you can always submit those if you're part of the body at Canyon Creek, or if you're local, you can throw them in the offering plate, or text, or just kind of however you're watching this or listening to this, you can ask there. And so week 2 is kind of like chapters 21 through 42-ish in our reading plan. And the first question we've got is coming from chapter 22. And the question is, how old was Isaac when Abraham took him up to offer him on the... And so that's out of chapter 22. And Genesis, back. I will say, we don't know. We have a window, and some people guess a few different things, and we can kind of walk through kind of what we know about it. We know he was definitely between 5 and 37. We have those cutoffs, and we have those cutoffs from we know when Sarah dies, right? And so he's Sarah's son, so he can only be a certain age younger, right? And we know, kind of based on the Hagar Ishmael story, we know that Isaac's the younger brother, and so because of Sarah's age and Hagar's age, all of that math, we can conclusively, we can absolutely say he was between 5 and 37. What else do we know about Isaac and that story that would kind of help us narrow that down a little bit?
He was strong enough to carry the wood.
That's right. Okay, so he carries his own wood up the hill. So he had to be old enough, to carry enough wood to make the fire to sacrifice him. So that definitely sets him kind of older. He had to be able to make the trip. And so it was a 3-day trip with all that wood on his back. I don't know that we have a ton more than that, really. And so some scholars have kind of painted the picture of, you've got the guy, he's got the wood, he's going up the hill, it's a 3-day journey. And so obviously there's a picture of Jesus there in his sacrifice. And so some people kind of, he must have been around 33. And certain scholars, I read their stuff. I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense. Not necessarily so, but I can see that. There are a couple other scholars that I think put him like in his 20s. But I would say definitely between 5 and 37. He had to be old enough to carry the wood. I don't know that we really have any other markers of that, right?
I don't think so.
Okay. Bad. The answer is we don't know. But he was old enough. Here's what we do know about that. He was old enough to carry the wood, type of Christ, but he was also old enough. His dad was 100 years old. And he was strong enough to carry the wood for his sacrifice up a hill for 3 days. So he definitely would have been strong enough to fend off his dad had he wanted to. And I think that really gives us kind of a picture of really just a reminder that Jesus was not sacrificed unwillingly. He laid down his life. Okay, next question. Chapter 29. So we have the story of, you can turn it. You have the story of Rachel and Leah. Jacob falls in love with Rachel, right? He works 7 years for her. He gets ready to have the honeymoon. And let me remember this right. chapter 29. Verse 20, so Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. They seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. Give me my wife, my days are fulfilled. Verse 23, now it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Verse 25, so it came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. So the question is, and I love just the understatement of, behold, it was Leah. So the question is, how did Jacob not know that he was starting his honeymoon with Leah rather than Rachel, whom he thought he was?
Well, I'd imagine it was probably dark in the tent, so he.
Right, because it was
Couldn't
before
see her.
street lights and light. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'd imagine the sisters weren't very different in
Yeah,
their size and shape. I'd
Yeah.
imagine. And two, he had never been intimate with either one of them, so
true.
he probably wasn't that close to know in the dark. I'd imagine.
Yeah, that's a good point. Dating back then was a lot different. You didn't really spend a lot of time with the other
One-on-one.
person until you were married. So he might not have ever spent time
Right.
with, yeah, okay. It was dark. Yeah, and that's a good point. They were sisters. And a lot of sisters look very similar, especially, yeah, a lot of some sisters look very similar. And then, of course, he kind of brings her in after the wedding feast, so it's very likely he was drunk. Because that was just kind of or at least slightly intoxicated. Let's see. Yeah, it came past in the evening. He took Leah's daughter and brought her Jacob, and he went into her. And I think too, just assumption is really powerful. You know, that's why illusion and magic shows and stuff work, is because your eyes are already kind of assuming a certain thing, and so just he had really no reason to think it wasn't gonna be
Right, he
her.
trusted.
Yeah, and I'd point out this too. We talked about how could Jacob not know that it was Leah instead of Rachel. Kind of for the same reason I think that Esau didn't know, or Isaac didn't know that it was Jacob and not Esau. Right? We have this story right after Jacob pretends to be Esau to get to kind of steal Isaac's blessing, and so it's dark. He's blind, so it's not dark, but he's blind, and then there's that, which then kind of serves Isaac, right? Because Isaac did the whole thing when he was, they wandered in. He looks at his wife, kind of like his dad Abraham did. He looks at his wife and says, "Hey, pretend you're my sister, so that it'll go well with me." Yeah. Could you imagine? I try to think of it from Leah's standpoint. Whether some people think that Leah was kind of in on it, kind of like Jacob was in on the Jacob and Esau thing. And some people think that Leah, she was the older sister, so she just thought it was like customary that she's being given. Because it wasn't this romantic idea of we fall in love, and it was just, this is just a course of events. And so it could be that she thought that she was legitimately being given in marriage. And then she wakes up and finds out that was not.
Yeah, it'd be devastating for her.
Yeah. I think of the kindness of God. It goes on, and God gives Leah lots of children. Rachel kind of gets upset about it. There's the whole mandrake thing. But Leah, as she's having these children, she recognizes that the Lord has been good to me. Even after, such a lame Such a lame. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a girl. I wouldn't want to wake up and find out that my wife was like, "Oh, you? Ah, bummer." You know, that's not cool.
No.
How did Jacob not know? We got how old was Isaac? We did that. Oh, the speckled lamb thing. So in chapter 30, we have this story of, you know what I'm talking about? The story when Jacob puts kind of these striped branches or whatever, and then his sheep have like striped sheep, and so he puts the healthy ones there, and then Laban changes the rules, and then he puts like the speckled things there. So is this teaching us something about science, or was this like cleverness, or how did that even work? Thoughts?
I've had quite a question mark there. Pretty much every time I read that story, I'm like, I don't know how that's even possible.
Yeah.
And it kind of seems like, since he knew that that's what would happen, like, kind of was like the Lord blessing him and saying, I'm going to give you all of this, just do these things. Or was it an accident that he discovered this would happen, and now he's just, this trickery's happened, and he's, I don't know. It almost kind of feels like there's some thievery there, but then it's really not if he follows the guidelines that were laid out. I'm not sure. It is.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some trickery. Like, for instance, if I knew, I don't know, like if I knew, in this example, I guess, if I knew that making them look at stripes would make them breed stripes, then I would only put the healthiest ones there. The little ones, I don't want them part of my flock, and so, you know, you keep them out. So, I mean, okay, so, and I've heard all kinds of things. And here's the problem. I've heard things that are true. And here's we have to be careful when we're teaching the Bible, because and when I've taught guys to teach the Bible, I've had to tell them, yes, what you're saying is, the Bible does say that, but the Bible doesn't say it there, right? And so I've heard guys say things that are true, but probably not what the passage is teaching. And for instance, I heard this really great sermon. If you take the Bible out of it and just take of it as a motivational, it was a great speech on what we look at, we reproduce. What we celebrate, we duplicate. That is absolutely true. Don't think it's what's happening here. But the idea is like, man, we just focus on what we want to reproduce, and that's what we'll do. And I don't know, maybe he's right, maybe I don't see it, but I don't think that's what's going on here. I tend to be a pretty simplistic, you know, bacon and eggs kind of guy. I think the key to this whole sheep stripe thing, and if you're listening, you're like, I have no idea what they're talking about. Just so you know, we are in a larger context of a Bible reading plan. And so we're going over kind of, you're like, man, they're going so fast. Well, yeah, because we've all already read this week's reading. And so if you're kind of lost, that's what's going on. And if you don't have that reading plan, this might be a great week to just jump in with us. You don't have to start at the beginning. What's today?
Today is the 12th.
The 12th, whatever day you're watching it. If you're like, the 12th, I'm going to start on day 12. Jump in with us. So if it seems like we're just really rushing through, it's because we're in the greater context of having read the plan. Okay.
And if you haven't joined us yet and you want to, the reading plan we're following is a book by book on heartlight.org.
Okay, there you go.
So, yeah.
And so I tend to think that the reason what's going on here is explained in chapter 31, verse. Actually, I think I'm going to start back in. He's talking to Rachel, verse 7, 31, verse 7. Your fathers deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God didn't allow him to hurt me. If he said, hey, speckled are your wages, I got a bunch of speckled. And if he said, streaks are yours, then they all bore streaked. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. And now watch this. I think this is the explanation. And it happened at the time when the flocks conceived that I lifted my eyes and saw in a dream. And behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. Then the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, here I am. He said, "Lift your eyes now and see. All the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, gray spotted, for I have seen all that Laban is doing to you." And so I think what's going on there is God just said, hey, in a dream, hey, do this. And he did that. And contrary to the laws of the normal working of nature, God did a miraculous thing. And I think what we're watching there explained is God kind of told Jacob how he wanted to bless him. Jacob obeyed, and then shebang.
Yeah.
So
I must not have had my thoughts in this while I was reading this, because
yeah.
I don't remember that part of that.
I'm not a sheep herder.
Yeah.
I'm not, maybe one of those guys would be like, actually, Pastor, if I put polka dotted fences up, my sheep are polka dotted. I don't know. It doesn't seem normal to me.
No.
I think what's going on is that God is just supernaturally doing a thing
Blessing
based
him.
on, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. We did that one. How about, yeah, we're zipping through these. Joseph and Potiphar. All right. Summarize for us. Give us a story about Joseph and Potiphar. I keep doing that. And that's going to be in verse 37.
Yep. Chapter 37.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So Joseph's in prison at this time, if I remember correctly.
Let's see. He's already been, his brothers threw him in a pit, and then they took him down. They sold him. They haven't, so he goes from Potiphar's house to prison. That's how he ends up in prison.
Right.
Right. So Potiphar's wife is kind
This
of.
is when Potiphar's wife seduces him or blames him, accuses him. I guess she doesn't blame him. She accuses him of doing a wrong, a wicked wrong, and then he gets put into prison because of that.
All right.
But prior to that, he was one of Potiphar's top men, right?
Yeah. So he gets thrown in a pit, ends up in Potiphar's house. Potiphar elevates him because God was with Joseph. Potiphar's wife was like, "Wow, that guy's handsome and he's capable." And us nerd types, we got it going on anyway. And so she's like, this accountant guy. And so she wants him, and day after day she tries to seduce him. He doesn't want anything to do with it. And so one day she just grabs him to force herself on him, and he runs away. Okay. And so the question is, what are we supposed to learn from that? One, as a woman, don't grab someone you're not married to and try to force yourself on them. That's not a good idea.
But Joseph, as a man of God, he still did what he was supposed to do.
Okay.
Like, he still walked uprightly regardless of the consequences.
Sure.
That could have came.
Mm-hmm.
He did not give in to her seductions.
Okay.
And then even he even went to jail because, if he would have given in to her, who knows what she would have done.
Sure.
But he stood upright and he chose to deny those temptations.
Yeah. I would warn us against a couple things. We always have to remember, and it's one of the things I say a lot of times, that story is not a story about Joseph. It's a story ultimately of the whole story of Jesus. And so part of that is, Abraham's, Isaac, and Jacob's seed, Judah, through eventually David, eventually Jesus, that promised line had to be protected, which meant and Joseph ended up, through him getting to Egypt, ended up being part of protecting that line. And so I would say that we have to be careful in thinking, oh, well, Joseph's the good guy of the story, let's be like Joseph, because it's not ultimately a story about Joseph. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we have to be careful about is we tend to think, wow, Joseph, because he was obedient, he eventually was like second to Pharaoh. And that's his like reward. But that's the problem with that is now we have this Jew, this lover of God, who is not living in the promised land, who is living in a pagan world, serving in a pagan government, forcibly married to a priestess of a pagan god. And when Daniel is put in the same boat, we consider that captivity. And so we can't look at Joseph and think, oh, well, that's his reward. That's not. That's the land of his sorrows, and he's looking back to get to his family. And so what do we learn from that? I don't know that we... I think that's kind of pointing us a picture of how God got Joseph to where God wanted him to be, despite the things that were happening to him. Obedience is always good, no doubt about it. God will always get it. I think this is more a picture of God's sovereignty than it is of Joseph being the hero, right? Yeah, so if you're a lady, don't forcibly grab men that work for you and try to have sex with them. If you're a guy and a girl does it, take off running and maybe you'll get put in prison. I don't know. So, yeah, okay. And then the last question is from chapter 41. What does Zephanath Paneah mean? This is what, so Pharaoh gives, this is 41 verse 45. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zephanath Paneah. And he gave him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. So Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Okay, so they want to know what does what does his given Egypt name mean? And I'll just let you answer this one.
Okay. Let's see. Let me see if my Bible's here tells me.
Are you looking in your study Bible?
Yes. It's probably Egyptian for God speaks, he lives, or... Oh, no, that's a different one. So, yeah, probably Egyptian for God speaks, he lives.
Okay. It's probably this or probably that. We don't know. Right. And so it's definitely Egyptian. We know that. And when the probablys, they... Okay, so basically it's... From the root of the word and how languages change over time, it sounds kind of like this, and maybe it sounds kind of like that, and so that's their guesses. I don't think anyone knows.
Yeah. I don't know.
There are some, and I think Egyptian scholars kind of have given us that. I don't know. There might be some old ancient experts in hieroglyphics that definitely claim to know. I don't know anyone that I kind of, for years that used to, it hit me and I'd look it up, and every year that I'd go through the Bible I'd kind of look it up, and every year it was the same thing, so I kind of quit looking it up. So either maybe there's some ancient experts out there that know, or maybe new things have come to light and maybe someone knows, but I think I'm pretty safe in saying we don't know. I don't know. Do you know?
I don't know.
All right, we don't know.
I can only go by the things the scholars tell me in my books, or theologians tell me in my Bible. So.
Okay.
No.
So we've covered, we've covered basically from like Abraham to Joseph, in Egypt, kind of is where we're at. Any questions that you have? Anything that stuck out to you as you were reading through?
No, to be honest, I haven't completed this reading, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let me tell you what, if you're reading through and you've skipped a day or skipped 2 days, the next morning when you pull it out, just jump in on the day you're at. Just jump in where you're at. We're going to keep going through. And you know what? If you happen to hit all 365 days, let me know. I'll give you a sticker or something. It'll be cool. But most of us, even us, a lot of us, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is take a nap. Sometimes, life happens and we get that. Just jump in, keep going. And, yeah. I hit all my days. Just saying.
Good
I
job.
did, yeah.
Good job.
Mm-hmm. So, if I make it all 365, maybe I'll give myself a sticker. Cool. So, again, if you're local, You can, write out your questions, get them to us. If you're not local, feel free to jump in and send us your questions as you're going through. And again, it's anything that you're like, what the heck was that? Or something that bothered you. Last week we did a lot. It's like, man, I just really, I don't like that. Yeah, just any kinds of questions like that we really entertain. So, are we done?
I think so.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. You've been watching us just drink coffee and talk about the Bible. Next week is we're finishing up Genesis and jumping into Exodus, and so stay with us on the journey.